Welcome to another session of Technology by Performance. I'm Ken Umansky, your host. My guest today is Edward Chenard, a data product and analytics leader. Edward has over 20 years of experience with both startups and Fortune 500 companies, leading and creating teams in product development, innovation, and data analytics. He has created over 100 digital and data products, many of which have generated more than $1 billion in revenue. Edward has a BA from Norbert College and an MBA from Thunderbird School of Global Management. Welcome, Edward, and thank you for joining us today. I'm glad you could be with us.
Thank you for having me.
I think we'll have an interesting discussion. It seems like you're deeply committed to helping companies transition into the world of new technology and in helping them build billion-dollar products. That's really what we want to discuss today is some of your experience and what you see happening in the future. So let me ask you your first question. How do you see AI impacting businesses in the next 3 years?
I think that well, AI is one of those things where it's something we've seen in the past where there's a lot of hype, a lot of promise, and I expect there'll be a lot of experimentations over the next 3 years. And through that, we're going to see some spectacular failures, which are going to be inevitable. And eventually we'll settle down to what's going to be really what's useful for it. Right now, everyone's saying it's like everyone's going to lose their job because of AI. It's going to replace us. Well, who really wants to live in that world? I don't.
Right.
So, all this hype right now, it's just kind of fantasy. And somebody who's been using, the generative AI tools for a couple of years now, and then, other areas of AI for over a decade, I just don't really see it as, guys like Sam Altman proposing a certain worldview of it. I don't really see that happening. I see it helping us replace some tedious, mundane work that none of us like doing. But for the most part, it's not going to be as earth-shattering as they say it will be.
How have you seen AI being used, and do you think that that's going to proliferate in the future, or is that just for now? Are we going to grow AI in some way, manner, shape, or form? How's it going to work?
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking like generative AI stuff, a lot of it's like chat bots. I've used it as like a learning tool, which there I think is very helpful. So in that situation, it's like helping somebody who's like new to an industry or new to a company to better understand, say, the terminology and the unique aspects of an industry. There, it's cutting training time in half. Yeah, it's a great way of using it as a tool to improve the business. What I've seen with companies doing also are chat bots, where that's where it gets amusing to watch. You've seen things like the guy who bought a car for like $100, and the chat bot's like, "Hey, this is a legal deal. Can't get out of it now." It's like, "Yeah, sure, I'll buy what should be a $60,000 truck for 100. Sure." I'm not sure if the dealership wanted to honor that, or you saw, Air Canada, their chat bot gave somebody a discount on a bereavement fare, and then they were saying, "Oh, no, the chat bot is actually independent. It's not part of us." And of course, that went to court, and the judge was like, "No, you guys are out of your mind thinking that's going to fly." You're going to see a lot of those chat bots, but they're horrible. I just saw an article today, somebody was saying like H&R Block, TurboTax are using them, and they're saying these things are giving you horrible advice. And it's like, yeah, that's where people bought into the hype without really looking into, it's like, well, really, how well are these things?
Yeah.
When you have something that's where they say hallucination is part of the product, it's like, nah, you're not ready for prime time.
Yeah. Well, I think H&R Block regrets coming out with an AI product as quickly as they did. They're being sued for lots of different reasons because the AI isn't performing well. So that gets me to another question. What do you think about all the stories about AI going to take over the world and eliminate human beings? What do you think? What's your opinion on that?
I always find it funny, the peoples whose jobs probably could get taken over are the ones who think that they shouldn't. And the jobs that they think should be taken over probably shouldn't be. You see all these things like, "Oh, we can replace call centers." Come on. How many of us, when you talk to one of these stupid, automatic messages, do you just sit there and say, "Give me a human. I want to talk to an agent"?
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's like, sure, I understand it from a business perspective why you'd want to do that. But from a customer's perspective, nobody likes it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, hey, software engineers, data scientists, accountants, why couldn't you replace them with AI? Of course, they're the ones advocating everybody else gets replaced.
Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. You've built a lot of key products that have made a lot of money. What have you found is successful in building those billion-dollar products? They've been successful, let me put it that way.
They're successful because I don't listen to the crowd. Now, I'm in primarily the data space, and everybody's very much focused on statistics, math along those lines. Most of them can't run a P&L in that math, which I always find interesting. But I don't sit there and memorize models and formulas and so on. I sit there and I try to understand people. And that's really always been the success. I built a platform at Best Buy called the Experience Platform, which they still actually use today. It's a personalization platform. That brought in over 1 billion, and that was because I focus on the customer experience. Now, yeah, I was using lots and lots of data. I was using various models, but those were my tools. I didn't obsess about the tools. I obsessed about the experience. And that's always been the really the one of the things is focusing on the customer more than anything else. And really, what are their goals? What are their hopes? What are their aspirations? And then trying to achieve that. And you use the data to try to tease that out. Problem that I see with most companies are they focus on the data, they focus on the models, and they forget there's somebody actually generating all that data that they're looking at.
Mm,
And
yeah.
so, I'll talk to data scientists and be like, so how are you figuring out how to boost sales? Well, I just listen to the data. Well, data doesn't speak, it's interpreted. So if you don't actually understand how to interpret the data based off of the person who generated that data, you're going to make some bad decisions. Like when I went to Target, that's what was going on there. Their personalization team, bunch of guys, single, out in Silicon Valley. A lot of them weren't American. And they're interpreting the data based off of their own habits instead of the over 85% of target customers who are female. And it's like, how can you guys create an experience for people that you don't talk to, you don't understand, and you aren't even a part of that group?
So,
Just said,
uh,
well, we're going to use this model, that model, we're going to improve the architecture. No, just go understand the customer,
yeah.
really understand them. And when I finally forced them to do that, then all of a sudden the conversion rates were doing what they were supposed to do.
So give us some examples of some of the other products you've developed using that same approach.
Yeah, well, when I was at C.H. Robinson, so they're a logistics company. They're the largest in the U.S. at the time. I think there's might be number one or number two, not quite sure now. But they were seen as kind of out of date by a lot of the analysts in the space. You're talking a 100-plus-year-old company. And just sitting around, seeing what customers were saying, a lot of them were saying, oh, we want predictive analytics for our logistics. Well, they were saying predictive, but when you actually talk to them, what they really wanted was prescriptive. Now, the difference there is predictive is saying, hey, tomorrow it's going to rain. And prescriptive is saying, not only tomorrow is it going to rain, so you should have an umbrella before you leave the house.
Mm, okay.
That's the big difference. So a lot of the companies are saying we want predictive, but I realized I wanted prescriptive. So one of the things we did was we were like, hey, basically what you want to know is my shipment going to show up on time or not? And if it's not, what can I do about it? That simple, boiling it down to that,
Hmm.
and then saying, okay, well, what actually delays shipments? Well, things like road construction, accidents, weather. We can get that data. And then we could forecast, is that shipment going to show up on time or not? That was huge. It was so big. When companies like John Deere and Microsoft heard about it, they said, we'll fund it, just build it. Microsoft said they tried doing it and they failed. So
Hmm.
they just said, we'll pay you just to build this thing because we want it yesterday. And yeah, it became this big product called Navisphere Vision. It was considered like, the future of logistics at the time. And yeah, fairly big idea.
Yeah. Well,
And again, didn't really the data was simple, the models were simple. It was just really understanding I got a customer pain point and I've got a solution that solves that pain point that makes them happy.
it sounds like you have a good grasp of the customer and the user. How important is knowing tech for success in those products?
Not very important, really. If Because the technology changes all the time. So, like if I'm hiring a data scientist or an engineer, it's like, yeah, okay, I need you to understand these particular tools we're using. But I actually interview more for understanding how well do you learn? How curious are you? Are you willing to adapt to change? That's really what I look for. And that's what I think is really important. Because yeah, when I started in with data science, we were using Java. Now nobody really uses that. Everyone, then there was the battle between R and Python. Now it's primarily Python, at least where I live. And those things always change. 5 years from now, it'll be something else. Same thing with tools. We started out with Hadoop. Then we moved on to things like Databricks, and now it's like, hey, Databricks versus Snowflake, and then you have the whole cloud taking over. Now people are saying, maybe on-prem's better now. So yeah, those things always change. How well can you adapt? How well can you see those changes coming? And how well can you build something that is flexible? That's far more important to me.
Hmm. Okay. Well, let me take it a step further. It's tough economic times. Maybe not now, but we're going to face tough economic times, and we have in the past. What's more important than technology than for helping businesses grow during those downturns in the market or in the economy, I should say?
Well, when we're in like tough economic times, everybody's got a problem. You got to be able to have a solution to those problems. And that again goes back to understanding your customers. This is what we're seeing with AI. Everybody wants to use AI because it's more of a fear of missing out. But then when you really look at it and say, okay, let's get past the gimmicky stuff like the chatbots. What is it really doing for us? What value is it really adding? And is it creating more risks for us? I would say for a lot of companies right now, it's creating a lot more risks.
Why do you say that?
Well, again, as long as you have hallucination, that's a factor in a lot of these generative AI tools. It's essentially saying, yeah, our product will just make stuff up. Now, if you're in a field like healthcare, do you really want an AI tool just making stuff up instead of just saying, hey, I really don't know what the diagnosis is or what the treatment should be? I'd much rather it say that than just say, hey, yeah, just cut the guy's arm off.
Yeah, I understand that one. How do you spend your time learning to stay ahead of all the trends, all of the things that are changing in the technology world? Um, how do you stay ahead of that?
Well, there's newsletters, there's just kind of talking on different forums with people. But for the most part, when it comes to the technology, it's, I like to say it's like we're really just reinventing things with new tools, but it's still the same issues we're facing. So I actually spend a lot more time on things like UX, CX, really understanding human behavior, psychology, those areas, because that's really where the best bang for your buck tends to be. It's like, hey, how do I really engage a customer? How do I really solve their problem instead of thinking I'm solving it? How can I really get them to purchase with me instead of going to Amazon and getting it?
Gotcha. So if you have one last thought for our audience, what would that be?
I would definitely say that when it comes to technology, don't obsess about it, and don't really look for it as being the savior. What's really going to save you is a more holistic approach in where technology becomes one piece of it, and if you're doing everything else correctly, it becomes the easy part. I mean, for me, if like when building solutions for customers, if I understood their pain points, I understood their experience and what they're hoping for, the tech solution actually became quite easy. and almost a no-brainer at that point because you had all the information you needed.
That's great advice. I think our audience will have learned a lot from that. Well, we're out of time. Thanks for sharing with us your insight and experience in creating innovation, billion-dollar plus products, as well as your view of what's coming in the world of AI. It was both interesting and a great learning opportunity for me, and I think for our audience. How can our listeners contact you if they have comments or questions?
You can find me on LinkedIn, or you can go to my website, echenard.com. That's ECHENARD.com.
Edward, thank you very much. Again, thanks for your time. And to our audience, remember, if you need help with any size technology challenge, please contact Performix Business Solutions at performixbiz.com. I'm your host, Ken Umansky, and until we meet again on another technology podcast, keep on innovating.